We stand on the edge of profound change. To meet the demands of a green transition, we need collective wisdom, diverse voices, and bold ideas. Collaboration is the key to unlocking our sustainable future. Together, we can overcome the challenges ahead and seize the opportunities that will define the green economy.
So we're going to drink cocktails and wine and network more in exactly 5 minutes time. So we've set a longer time for the wrap up. I'm not going to take more than 5 minutes, but I wanted to try and do 5 or 6 reflections from the day, and then for us to sort of repair up to the third floor to having drinks. So one thought on each of the panels. Nigel Topping's panel, don't underestimate the speed of parabolic exponential growth, how quickly things can change, and that populists don't like to take away carrots. Secondly, the SME panel, a really interesting debate between the burdens that are placed on SMEs, how much paperwork they have to fill in, and how much compliance work they have to do, versus what we can do for them to both incentivize and reward the net zero behavior, but also Eva Dimitriadis' sort of rejoinder, which says you can't manage what you don't measure, and therefore not allowing people to kind of escape from the responsibility of sort of moving yourselves in a net zero direction. And I think there's some infrastructure work to be done on policymakers to make it easier for SMEs to judge their performance, to report their performance, and to make progress. On the fossil fuel panel, again, I think a really interesting debate between engagement, not the dichotomies and the binaries between engaging and divesting, but rather about if you're going to engage in a serious, purposeful, stringent, and non-cosmetic way. And that if you have 5% of capital markets responsible for 70% of global emissions, there's an argument that this particular sector needs a special combination of sticks and carrots to engage, because they're potentially enormous financiers of the green transition, but they're also potentially remarkable spoilers. On emerging economy, I loved Kingsmill's observation about capital cost parity, the more optimistic part of the panel, that 73% of the global south or emerging economies were ready to be able to take this finance and run with it. And then the more skeptical view from the right of the panel, physically, not politically, saying it's not that case. There's some economies where it's much more difficult. They're starved of capital. And then I think from the EBRD's perspective, being able to say what you really need to get wind auctions working well is clear top-down messaging, sophisticated regulatory environments, and then let market forces kick in and operate sensibly, going back to the question of capital cost parity. Let markets work in a proper enabling environment. The nature panel, flood mitigation, nutrient neutrality to purify water, voluntary carbon markets, environmental land management schemes, a plethora of really interesting financing mechanisms which are new and nascent, but can start giving some bones to the idea that nature can truly be an asset class and truly be financed. And I think what the UK is doing in this space is interesting and novel. Those of you deeply immersed in it will say imperfect and inadequate, but there's lots to be done in this space. And a lot of the kind of work of TNFD and the enormous progress they've made, I think, is evidence of the fact that this is the next frontier in climate finance. On insurance, well, take all the conversations we've just had and said, how can this sector both underwrite, enable, and de-risk the progress that we've made in this space? And also, I think there is a and this is a sort of shameless plug for the conference, next conference we're going to do, which I hope you will all sign up for tomorrow, on insurance and climate change. There's an incredible amount of interesting work to be done about insurance and regulation. The reason why when earthquakes happen in Japan that fewer people die than when earthquakes happen in Turkey or in Syria is because building codes mandated by insurance companies make those buildings seismic proof. And I think that there is a creative role for insurance companies to play in getting ahead of resilience and adaptation by requiring that particularly building and public infrastructure thinks about foreseeable future climate impacts and then comes alongside the public sector and those people who are policyholders to help finance the adaptation and resilience mandated by that regulation. On AI, I think everybody probably wrote down the 9 or 10 or 11 remarkable optimistic ways in which AI can be a source of accelerated path to net zero. But I was struck by how the nature session, the insurance session, and the AI session sort of bled into each other. Precision agriculture, grid optimization, fuel efficient routing on Google Maps, flooding, a 7-day advance flood warnings, AI, building power optimization, AI as a way of optimizing carbon storage. All these technologies, I think we need a Marshall Plan for these. They need to be financed and accelerated. And I think the social quid pro quo is if you're going to lead to this exponential growth in electricity and power, then you better offset this by doubling down on the impact that you have. On the US elections, and with this I'm going to kind of, and the blend between it and the National Transition Plan session, I loved the shades of gray and the Descartes on the National Transition Plans. And it struck me, and it also comes through the conversation with Rachel, people trying to do the right thing in public policy, it's a sort of hark back to the Trump Kamala, she has to be flawless, he gets to be lawless thing, which is you have to be perfect, you have to embrace complexity, you have to do hard things filled with trade-offs and ambiguities. They're not things that you can very easily massage into wonderful, easy sound bites, because these things are really hard and tough and complex and involve very difficult trade-offs. And so we find ourselves in that world of doing that hard technocratic stuff. And the demagogues who sit on the other side get to throw rocks and get to blame people and get to demonize people. And then we're surprised when we lose. Because we go, can't you understand the subtlety? And don't you know it takes 4 years to roll out the IRA? And if you think it takes 4 years to roll out the IRA and you're just beginning to see the benefits of it now, then I think if you're a UK minister right now thinking about what you've just seen in Rachel Reeves' budget and the remarkable investment they've made in net zero, and they think about the next election and they play that forward about what's just happened in the US, I'd be worried. And I'd be worried absent a proper, compelling, not just narrative, but set of measures that make meaningful differences to ordinary people's lives. And I had a pull aside with Nigel just before he got up onto the stage, and he said this warm home scheme is really interesting. You know, it will pay people back in 8 to 10 years, and you'll be able to, you know, finance it over that period of time. And he said that with the enthusiasm of a technocrat, because if you do roll that out and it does pay back over 8 to 10 years, that's a great thing given what we know about the contribution of the built environment to emissions. But 8 to 10 years is not politically salient, right? It's not what is going to change ordinary people's lives. And we have to go away and distill down onto a 5-point plan, all the ways in which climate and finance and net zero will impact people's lives in the short to medium term in a way that they understand in terms of their lived experience. And until we do that in a consistent way and then communicate it clearly, we will continue to have last night happen everywhere else. We've got to be better at the communication of this stuff. So we've just had 8 hours of wildly sophisticated conversations about technical points on climate finance. We have to take all of that, assimilate it, digest it, communicate it, and translate it into ways that make a meaningful difference in ordinary people's lives. And that's my kind of takeaway, and the project of the Conduit over the next year and all the different things that we're going to do, we're going to bang on this point, because we've got to combine the quest for economic equity, more vigorous democracy, and the path to net zero. And we've got to be able to do all 3 of those things in a synchronized way if we're going to do this in a way that's sustainable, not something where we do it, we stop, we lose an election, we come back, we stop, we lose an election, because the planet doesn't have time for that kind of yin and yang. I'm going to end on this. We have a wonderful program called Impact Careers. It's launching on Monday. And it's for people who are students who want to do the sorts of things that many people in this room are doing. It's taking people in a Jesuit-like fashion when they're 18, 19, and 20 and saying, if you want to make a meaningful impact in the world in whatever sphere you are, in finance or fashion or law or publishing or anything else, we want to give you a pathway to having a career that's more meaningful and more impactful. And so we're going to put some stuff up on the website about that. Anybody who wants to support these remarkable young students make meaningful decisions at this point in their lives so that they do the sorts of things that make our societies more sustainable and more inclusive, with that kind of talent, please let us know. We'll give you a set of things you can do. But I think these are the kind of DNA of the future, and we want these young people to be able to make really meaningful decisions. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a remarkable conversation.